But in verse 16, God does intervene. There's no question. Because when Paul's sister's son, his nephew, heard of the plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. Now, it's amazing that Paul's sister's son was actually able to find out and hear about this plot. And so he goes in, tells Paul, and in verse 17, Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the garrison commander. He's something to tell him." So he took him to the commander, and the centurion said, "Paul, this prisoner that we're holding, sent for me, asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you." And in verse 19, the commander took the young man, drew him aside, and said, "What is it you have to tell me?" And in verse 20, this wonderful son of Paul's sister says, "The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul back before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information. Don't give in to them, because more than 40 of them are waiting in ambush. They've taken an oath not to eat or drink until they've killed him. And they are ready, waiting for you to agree to send Paul to the Sanhedrin." So this is Paul's sister's son is explaining this to the Roman commander. He's not a Jew, he's the Roman commander. Verse 22, the commander dismissed the man and cautioned him, "Don't tell anybody that you've reported this to me." So in verse 23, the commander then calls two of his centurions and orders them, "Get ready, a detachment of two." I mean, just look what they're doing. I'm finding this is so interesting, because he was commanded to get 200 Roman soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen. Goodness me, that's a small army, that's nearly 500. To go to Caesarea at 9 o'clock tonight. Provide a horse for Paul, that he may be taken safely to the Roman governor, Felix, at Caesarea. And he actually wrote a letter of explanation, explaining what's happened, saying that he was taken by the Jews. He's a Roman citizen. Paul's a Roman citizen, and he's been taken by the Jews, and they're about to kill him. But the commander says, "I came with my troops, I rescued him, because he's a Roman citizen. We're Romans, we rescued him. And I wanted to know what the accusation was. I brought him to the Sanhedrin and found out the only accusations against Paul were to do with Jewish religion. And so when I found out that the Jews had got a plot to kill him, I sent him to you and ordered the accusers to come to you to present the case." So it's very clear that by verse 31, the soldiers carrying out their orders took Paul with them during the night, brought him as far as Antipatris, and the next day they let the cavalry go on with him while they returned to the barracks. When the cavalry arrived in Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. The governor read the letter and asked what province he was from. Learning that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will hear your case when your accusers get here." Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. You know, this is a phenomenal story. It's absolutely phenomenal. So it says in chapter 24 that 5 days later, Ananias the high priest, went down to Caesarea with some of the elders and they brought accusations against Paul. When Paul was called in, the lawyer Tertullus presented his case before Felix, and saying, we've enjoyed long peace unto you, and your foresight has brought reforms in this nation everywhere. Felix, we acknowledge this with profound gratitude, but in order not to weary you, we ask you to hear this. We found this man a troublemaker, stirring up riots amongst the Jews all over the world. He's a ringleader of the Nazarene sect. Now, this is a new description. It's the first time this comes up. The Nazarene sect. And even tried to desecrate the temples. We seized him. By examining him yourself, you'll learn all the truth. And the Jews joined in the accusation, stating these things were true. But when the governor motioned for him to speak, Paul replied, Felix, I know that for a number of years you've been a judge over this nation, so I gladly make my defense. And he makes the full defense here, giving the whole story. And so after it all, after several days, Felix came with his wife Drusilla. It's very interesting, who was a Jewess. And Felix then listened to him as he spoke about his faith in Jesus Christ. And when Paul spoke on righteousness, this is verse 24, chapter 24, as Paul discussed righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and said, that's enough for now, you can leave. When it's convenient, I'll send for you. At the same time, he was hoping that Saul would offer him a bribe. So he sent for him frequently and talked with him, and he was there for 2 years. I want you to understand, he was there for 2 years. Felix died and was succeeded by Porcius Festus, but because Felix wanted to grant a favor, he left Paul in the prison. So actually, Paul is in prison here in Caesarea for 2 years. And then in chapter 25, 3 days after arriving in the province, Festus went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem. And this really is developing into such a powerful story. I'm going to make a break here because the result is, from all of this, that even finally King Agrippa arrived in Caesarea to meet with Festus. And Festus discovered Paul's case with the king. And he said, there's a man here whom Felix left as a prisoner when I went to Jerusalem. The chief priests and elders of the church brought charges against him and wanted him condemned. I told it, it's not the Roman custom to hand him over to any man before he's faced his accusers. When they came here, I did not delay the case, but convened the court and brought the man in. When his accusers made the accusation, they didn't charge him with any of the crimes I had expected. Instead, they had some points of dispute about their own religion and what he calls a dead man named Jesus, whom Paul claimed was alive. What a statement. I was at a loss how to investigate this. And so Agrippa says to Festus, I want to hear this man himself. Tomorrow I will hear him.